The morning Laurel Voss walked into my bait shop, I was elbow deep in a broken live well pump and thinking about nothing except whether I could fix it before the Tuesday charter group showed up. I had no idea that by sundown I would agree to the strangest thing anyone had ever asked me, or that 18 months later I would understand it was also the most honest. My name is Sam Wickfield. I'm 31 years old and I run a small charter fishing and bait operation out of Beaufort, North Carolina. 3 boats, 6 regular guides, a shop that smells like salt water and motor oil, and a reputation for knowing where the red drum run in October better than anyone on the Carolina coast. It's not a glamorous living. Most mornings start before light. Most evenings end with paperwork I don't fully understand and coffee I forgot to drink while it was hot. But the work is mine. No partner, no investor, no bank breathing down my neck. Just the water and the work and the clear math of whether the boats came back with fish or they didn't. Which is why the woman who pushed open my screen door at 9 on a Tuesday morning looked wrong in my shop the same way a sailboat looks wrong on a highway. She was maybe 34. Dark coat, good boots, the kind of put together that takes effort but doesn't advertise it. She looked at the tackle wall, then she didn't apologize for any of it. "Are you Sam Wickfield?" she asked. That caught me off guard. People who wanted charters called ahead. People who wandered in usually asked about shrimp. "Depends on what you need," I said. "I need a favor," she said. "A large one, and I need an answer before 5 o'clock today." I pulled my hands out of the pump housing and reached for the shop rag. 5 o'clock today, I repeated. Yes, I studied her. She wasn't nervous exactly, but she was holding herself the way people do when they've already had this conversation go wrong in their head a dozen times, and they're determined not to let it go wrong again out loud. "What kind of favor?" She set her bag on the counter. Not a purse. A leather portfolio, the kind that suggests a professional life full of people who have opinions about agendas. "My name is Laurel Voss," she said. "My father owns Voss Marine Holdings. He's slowly, and he knows it, and he's known it for 8 months, which is long enough to do something I wish he hadn't." I waited. "He revised his trust," she said, "to include a management succession clause. If I'm not in what his attorney is describing as a settled partnership before the quarterly board review on Friday, operational control passes to my Uncle Greer." "Settled partnership," I said. "His word for marriage." Her jaw tightened. "Or a domestic partnership filing. Something documentable and legal. He's old-fashioned in the specific ways that cause the most damage." I looked at her, then at the shop, then back at her. "Ms. Voss," I said carefully, "I fix boat motors and take people fishing." "I know what you do," she said. She opened the portfolio. "You turned down a lease offer from Greer's development group 14 months ago. The offer was for this property. He wanted to put a waterfront event venue here and fold your charter license into his tourism package." I remembered that offer. Remembered the man who delivered it too, young guy in a polo shirt who kept calling the boats assets. "I told him no," I said. "You told his representative that you'd sooner burn the dock than let it become a backdrop for rehearsal dinners." She looked up. His words in the follow-up email. He was not pleased. "Good." Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile. "That's why I'm here." The shop felt quieter than usual. Outside, a pelican landed on the dock post and just sat there like it was also listening. "Walk me through it," I said. Laurel did, methodically, without drama, the way people talk when they've run out of room for drama and have arrived at facts. Her father, Raymond Voss, had built the company over 40 years. 4 marinas, a commercial shipyard lease in Morehead City, a fleet management contract with a regional ferry operator. Real infrastructure. The kind of thing that employed 300 people and kept half a dozen small coastal suppliers in business. Greer Voss was Raymond's younger brother. He'd been on the board for 12 years and had spent most of them waiting. His plan, which Laurel had documentation for, was to liquidate the marina properties, exit the shipyard lease, and pivot what remained into a resort development partnership with an Atlanta-based hospitality group. "He'll take a company that operates working infrastructure," Laurel said, "and turn it into a brand. And your father knows this?" "My father thinks Greer has changed." Her voice was flat. "My father is dying and he wants to believe his brother is worth something. I understand it. I also can't let it cost 300 jobs because he needs to feel peaceful." I looked at the portfolio, at her hands which were steady, at the line
Why?
between her brows which had been there long enough to be permanent. Why me specifically? I asked. Because you're clean, she said. No debt, no investors, no political entanglements. You're known on this coast. People respect you, and because Greer already tried to buy you and you laughed at him. I didn't laugh. His email said you laughed. I thought about it. I may have laughed a little. This time she did almost smile. He can't pressure you. He can't flatter you. He can't find a lever. I've spent 6 weeks looking for someone who fits that description and who isn't already inside the industry in a way that creates conflicts. She paused. And you care about what gets preserved and what gets gutted. You said no to his offer because you knew what the doc would become. That was true. I'd known the second the polo shirt guy slid the proposal across my counter. What does this look like exactly? I asked. Laurel exhaled slowly. A domestic partnership filing today. Joint appearance at the board review Friday morning. After that, we agree on duration and terms in writing. If my father stabilizes and the clause becomes irrelevant, we dissolve it cleanly. If the board is satisfied and Greer loses standing, same. And if it doesn't go cleanly, then we handle it like adults who made an agreement, not like people who made a mistake. I sat on the edge of the counter. The Live Well pump was still broken. The Tuesday charter group was still coming. And a woman I'd met 11 minutes ago was asking me to become her legal partner before the business day ended. You've thought about what you're asking, I said. I've thought about almost nothing else for 6 weeks. What do I get out of it? She didn't flinch. Financial compensation for your time and any professional risk. Legal protection, independent counsel, full documentation. Whatever reasonable looks like to you. I don't want money. She looked at me carefully. Then what do you want? The same thing I asked for when Greer's guy showed up, I said. To be left alone to run what I built the way I built it. If this goes sideways, I want it in writing that Voss Holdings has no claim, no interest, and no standing anywhere near this dock. Laurel held my gaze. That I can do. And I want to understand the whole situation, not the version your attorney softened. Greer, the board, the clause, the risk if this falls apart publicly. That's fair. One more thing. She waited. If I do this, I don't become a prop, I said. I don't stand in a corner looking agreeable while you manage everything around me. If someone asks me a question, I answer it. If something doesn't sit right, I say so. Laurel looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I came here hoping you'd be difficult to handle. That sounds like a problem. It sounds like exactly what I need. She closed the portfolio. Do we have an agreement? I looked at the pump housing on the floor. At the screen door still swinging slightly from when she'd come in. At the pelican on the dock post, which had since lost interest and left. Then I thought about the Voss marinas. I'd worked out of the Beaufort location twice when my boats needed dry dock. 300 people, ferry contracts, a shipyard that actually built things. Let me call my dock manager, I said. His name was Pete, and he'd been running my day-to-day operations for 4 years. When I told him I'd be unreachable for the afternoon and possibly part of the week, he said, Is everything okay? Define okay, I said. There was a pause. Do I want to know? Probably not yet. Got it, he said. Go. Pete was like that. We didn't require a lot of explaining. The partnership filing happened at 2:15 at the county clerk's office, in a room that smelled like municipal carpet and someone's lunch from a place that used too much garlic. Laurel's attorney was there, a compact woman named Ellen, who had clearly done more before noon than most people do in a week. My attorney, a man named Harvey, who handled my business contracts and had driven 40 minutes without complaint when Laurel's office called his, stood beside me and read everything twice. This is tight, Harvey said quietly when he'd finished the filing paperwork. I know, I said. The exit clause is clean, though. Whoever drafted this, he nodded toward Ellen, gave you a real out, not a courtesy one. That mattered to me more than I expected it to. When we signed, Laurel's hand was steady. Mine was, too, but I noticed she held the pen a second longer than necessary after the last signature, like she was waiting to see if the ceiling would fall in. It didn't. On the drive to Morehead City, where the Voss Holdings headquarters occupied the top floor of a converted waterfront warehouse, Laurel briefed me in the passenger seat of her car. Not nervously. Efficiently. Like a person who has survived by being efficient and has almost forgotten there's another way. Greer would be there. 2 of his board allies would be there. Margaret Foss, the independent chair, would be there, and Laurel believed Margaret was genuinely neutral and genuinely tired of family warfare, which meant she would read the documentation carefully and rule on what it said rather than what anyone wanted it to say. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Be present," she said. "Answer honestly if anyone asks you something directly. Don't try to perform." I wasn't planning to. Most people plan to without knowing it. She glanced at me. "You might be different. You don't know that yet." "No," she said, "but I chose you anyway." That was the first moment I thought she might be someone worth knowing beyond whatever Friday became. The boardroom was on the top floor with a view of the Sound that under other circumstances I would have found worth looking at. The table was long, the chairs were expensive, and the room held the specific silence of people who are waiting to win or lose something significant. Greer was already there. He was shorter than I expected, and better dressed than was strictly necessary, which told me something. He looked at Laurel, then at me, and then at Laurel's hand, where a simple silver ring she had brought herself sat quietly. I was wearing one too. She'd offered a plain band from a jewelry supply kit Ellen had thought to bring. I'd looked at it and then, without planning to, I'd pulled off the paracord bracelet I'd worn for 3 years. The one my younger sister Nell had made me when she was 12 and going through a wilderness survival phase, and set it on the table beside the ring. "I'll use this," I'd said, "if that's all right." Laurel had looked at the bracelet like it surprised her. "It's not a ring," I'd said. "I can see that, but it's mine. And it means something, so if we're doing this, I'd rather wear something real." She'd looked at me for a moment, then she'd said, quietly, "Put the ring on. Keep the bracelet too." I had now? Greer's gaze moved from my wrist to my face. "Laurel," he said smoothly, "I see you've been creative." "I've been practical," she said. "There's documentation on the table." Margaret Foss, silver-haired and reading glasses already in hand, reached for the folder before anyone else did. Greer let his attention settle on me. "And you are?" "Sam Wickfield," I said. "I run charter boats out of Beaufort." A small beat, he recognized the name. I could see it land. "Right," he said. "I believe we made you an offer once." "You did. You declined." "I did." He smiled with a lot of teeth and not much else behind it. "And now here you are. Here I am. What exactly did she offer you?" He said it the way people say things when they want the room to hear the implication rather than the words. I looked at him. "Nothing I'd have taken if she had offered it," I said. "Which puts us in a pretty different position than you and I were ever in." The room went quiet in a specific way. Not shocked. More like everyone present had exhaled at the same time. Margaret set down the folder. "The filing is valid," she said. "Executed today, properly witnessed, meets the trust language." She looked over her glasses at Greer. "The clause is satisfied. Ms. Voss retains operational authority." Greer's smile didn't disappear. It just became a different kind of smile. "This won't hold." "It will hold for Friday," Margaret said, "and that's what the trust requires." She closed the folder. "We're adjourned." Greer stood too fast and said something to his attorney that I couldn't hear and didn't need to. He left without looking at Laurel, which told me more than if he had. After the room emptied, Laurel and I stood by the window with the Sound turning pink in the late light. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then she said, "You didn't have to do that." "Which part?" "Greer. What you said to him. He was suggesting you'd bought me." "I don't like being suggested at." She turned to look at me. "Most people would have stayed quiet." "I'm not most people." "I know," she said. And the way she said it was different from every other sentence she'd said all day. Less like an assessment and more like a fact she'd only just finished deciding was true. I looked at my wrist, the bracelet and the ring both there, which looked stranger than it felt. "My sister made that," I said. "She was 12. She's 23 now and works for a marine ecology lab in Wilmington and would absolutely lose her mind if she knew about today." Laurel looked at it. "What's her name?" "Nell, will you tell her?" I thought about it. Eventually. Probably when it's funny instead of just confusing. That got a real breath of a laugh out of her. Not the controlled kind. The kind that happens when your guard comes down by accident. "Come on," she said. "I'll drive you back to Beaufort." The car ride was quieter than the morning had been. Laurel drove. Ellen had already gone. My attorney Harvey had texted to say, "Call me when you're back, but good work today," which from Harvey was basically a standing ovation. About 20 minutes outside of Beaufort, Laurel's phone lit up on the console. She glanced at it and went still. What? I asked. Greer. She kept driving. He's already talking to someone at the Coastal Review. Anonymous source. Questioning the legitimacy of the filing. I picked up her phone and read the text from Ellen. Press inquiry logged. Suggest you not be alone tonight if photographed separately. Call me. I set the phone back down. Your place or mine? I asked. She looked at me sideways. If Greer is going to argue this is staged, I said, the least staged thing we can do is not act staged, which means you don't go back to whatever hotel you're staying in tonight while I drive back to an empty dockhouse. Laurel was quiet for a moment. My rental is in Beaufort, near the waterfront. My house is on the water. I have 2 garment bags and a work bag. I have a guest room with a window that sticks. She exhaled. This is not how I planned today going. Most good decisions aren't. After another moment, she said, all right. That was how Laurel Voss ended up at my kitchen table at 10 o'clock. On a Tuesday night, her laptop open, a bowl of the only thing I'd had ingredients for. Pasta with olive oil and whatever herbs were still alive on the back windowsill, between us. Reading through board filings while I looked over the structural survey of the Morehead City shipyard that she'd mentioned needing a second opinion on. I wasn't a structural engineer, but I'd been working on marine infrastructure for 10 years, and I knew what deferred maintenance looked like in a document. This beam replacement estimate, I said. It's low. She looked up. By how much? By a lot. Whoever quoted this has never actually replaced a support beam in saltwater-damaged wood. Or they did it on purpose. She was quiet. Greer's facilities team submitted that estimate. Then he was either incompetent or he wanted the number to look small so the asset looked cheaper to maintain. She stared at the document. Then she said, I need a real estimate. I can get you names tomorrow. People I trust. She looked at me across the table. Why are you doing this? The estimate thing? Any of it. The boardroom. Tonight. The pasta. I thought about it. The Voss Marina in Beaufort has been there since before I had a boat license, I said. My father used to take me there to watch the commercial trawlers come in. I know the guy who runs the fuel dock. His daughter is in my sister's cohort at the ecology lab. I set the survey down. This isn't abstract to me. It's not a portfolio and it's not a spreadsheet. It's a place. Laurel was quiet for a long time. Then she said, my father used to walk me through the shipyard on Saturdays when I was small. He knew everyone's name. Every welder, every rigger. Her voice was level but careful, the way voices get when they're carrying something heavy. He said the only reason to own anything was to take care of it. I didn't say anything. Sometimes the only response that isn't a diminishment is to let the thing be what it is. And now he's dying, she said. And he's trusting the wrong person because he needs to believe family means something. And I can't tell him he's wrong because he's not entirely wrong, he's just. She stopped. Too late to fix it, I said quietly. Yes, we sat with that for a minute. Outside, the water moved the way it does at night, steadily and without asking anything from anyone. Get some sleep, I said. The guest room window sticks on the left side. Lift and push, she nodded. Then she looked at my wrist again. The bracelet, she said. You really wore it all day. I said I would. You also said you don't perform. I wasn't performing. I looked at it. Nell made it the summer our dad sold his boat. She was trying to give me something that wasn't money. She was 12. I paused. Seemed like the right thing to wear today. Laurel looked at me like she was trying to figure out where to put that sentence. Then she said, Good night, Sam. Good night. The next 3 days were not a love story. They were phone calls, legal responses, a second board communication, a quote from an actual marine contractor that proved the beam estimate had been manipulated, and 2 long evenings at my kitchen table that felt nothing like strategy and everything like the beginning of something I hadn't planned for. Laurel met Pete. He looked at her, looked at me and said, She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who looked like she needed saving. She doesn't need saving. No, he said, she really doesn't. And then he went back to work, which was his version of approval. She walked the Beaufort Marina with me on Thursday morning and listened while I talked about tide schedules and fuel dock logistics and which slips had the drainage problems the Voss management team had been ignoring for 2 years. She asked questions that were specific and took notes and didn't pretend to know things she didn't know. I found that harder to resist than I expected. On Friday, the formal board review went cleanly. Margaret Foss read Greer's challenge, read the response Ellen had prepared, noted the manipulated estimate as a separate concern, and in the careful language of someone who has watched too many family businesses tear themselves apart, declined to invalidate the succession documentation. Greer looked at me on the way out and said, "This isn't finished." I said, "For today it is." He left. In the hallway, Laurel stood very still for a moment, not relieved exactly. More like someone who has been braced against something for so long that not being braced anymore requires its own adjustment. "You okay?" I asked. Getting there, she looked at me. "You said something to him. He needed to hear it. He'll make your life difficult." "He already tried," I said. "Didn't work the first time." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Why do you keep doing that?" "What?" "Saying the thing I need to hear right before I'm about to say it to myself." I didn't have a good answer for that. So I said, "I don't know. Maybe we think the same way about some things." She was quiet. Then, maybe. 3 weeks later, she came back to Beaufort. Not for the board, not for the filing. She called ahead and said she was bringing updated structural assessments and wanted a second opinion on the fuel dock repairs. I said she knew where to find me. She showed up on a Wednesday with the assessments and also, inexplicably, a bag of good coffee beans because she had apparently decided that whatever I'd been making was an offense she could correct. We worked at the kitchen table again. She stayed for dinner. She argued with me about the fuel dock timeline in a way that was specific and pointed and, as it turned out, partially correct. "Partially," I said. "Mostly," she said. "We can agree on partially. We can agree on mostly." Nell called that evening and I stepped outside to take it. When I came back in, Laurel was washing the two bowls from dinner with the focused calm of someone who does things like that without thinking about it, and something about the ordinary reality of her in my kitchen hit me somewhere behind the sternum. "My sister says hello," I said. Laurel turned around. "You told her?" "I told her you existed, and," she said, and I quote, "about time you met someone who can keep up with you." I sat down at the table. She's 23. She thinks everything is simpler than it is. Maybe she's right. I looked at Laurel. She looked back at me. Then she set the bowls in the drying rack, dried her hands, and said, "Sam, yeah, I'm not here for the fuel dock." I know, she came and sat across from me the way she had that first night. Except this time she wasn't carrying anything. No portfolio, no laptop, no documentation, just herself, which turned out to be a lot. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "Neither do I said. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't know what it is." She looked at her hands. "I came to Beaufort 6 weeks ago because you were clean and independent and Greer couldn't buy you. I told myself it was purely strategic." "It was strategic. It was also something else." "Yeah," I said. "I know." She looked up. "I don't do things like this. Neither do I. So what are we doing?" I thought about the dock, about the survey, about the first morning she walked through my screen door and the pelican that had sat there listening before losing interest and leaving. About Nell's bracelet on my wrist and the way Laurel had looked at it in the boardroom like it surprised her, and then again that night like it meant something she hadn't expected to find. "I think," I said, "we're doing exactly what we should be doing. We're just doing it out of order." She looked at me for a long moment, then she said, "I hate that that makes sense." "I know, Sam, yeah." And she reached across the kitchen table, in my small house behind my dock in the town neither of us had planned to find each other in, and she put her hand over mine. That was all. That was everything. A year later, the Voss Holdings Board approved a capital reinvestment plan for the marine infrastructure properties. Greer had resigned his seat in the fall after the manipulated estimate became part of a formal audit review. Raymond Voss, still alive and watching from a wheelchair at the quarterly meeting, had shaken my hand with both of his and said, "I'm glad she found someone who understands what things are worth." I looked at Laurel across the room. She caught me looking and raised an eyebrow in the exact way that meant, "Don't make it sentimental." So I didn't. I just shook her father's hand and said, "She mostly found herself. I just didn't get in the way." Raymond had laughed at that, which meant his judgment was still sound. Pete promoted himself to operations manager without asking, which I allowed because he was right. The Tuesday charter group still showed up every week. The live well pump worked fine. And some mornings, when Laurel was staying in Beaufort and came downstairs in one of my old flannels with the coffee she'd decided, We were both drinking now, and the water was doing what the water does. And Nell was texting one of them about something from the ecology lab. And everything was loud in the ordinary quiet way that only happens when your life has more in it than it used to. Some mornings, I thought about a broken pump and a screen door and a pelican that briefly had opinions and then left. And I thought about how nothing about any of it had made sense and how that turned out not to matter at all.